Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this fourth webinar in our EL Performance Matters Forum series. Today we'll be talking about supporting English learners in Connecticut's charter schools. My name is Megan Alyubicki-Flick, and I am the English learner consultant at the state. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Sabetos from the Performance Office, along with several of our colleagues from the Turnaround Office and several colleagues from the field. We're excited to have this conversation with you as kind of an initial opportunity to discuss this important topic and how English learners how programs and structures work for English learners in charter schools. Today's session does have closed captioning. If you are in need of closed captioning, that is available through the link in the chat. And this session is also being recorded and will be posted on our Performance Matters forum page. At this point, I will turn it over to Lisa Lamenzo, our Division Director in the Turnaround Office, for a greeting.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, everyone. It's great having you all with us here this morning. Thank you for being with us to dive into this very important topic, as Megan just mentioned, around English learners. I know I speak for the entire charter team, Rob, Felicia, Shakira, as well as the department on the whole. Thank you for what you are doing for our kids and families each and every day. I know you don't hear that enough, so thank you again. And to all the presenters here today, thank you for all your efforts in making today happen. We have quite the team here today, so without further ado, I'll turn it back over to the presenters.
Thanks, Lisa. Today we have with us a distinguished panel of educators from charter schools and public districts. We are joined today by Mary Newberry from Side by Side Charter School, Joanne Meehan from Capital Prep Harbor Charter School, Alejandra Corona Ortega from Elm City Montessori School, David Weinreb, also from Elm City Montessori School, and Pedro Mendia from the New Haven Public Schools. The way that we structure these presentations, typically when Michael and I are kind of planning, is that we identify some key statewide trends and we look at some data first, because we know that it's really important to make kind of make a case or to build a foundational understanding for why this topic is important and what particular nuances the data can tell us about this topic. So like our other presentations, the beginning of this presentation, Michael and I will be talking through some of the data that we found when we dug into statewide data pertaining to ELs and charter schools. You'll see that there are some similar trends when we look at ELs and charter schools as compared to ELs in the districts where the charter schools are located. And there are some really distinct elements of ELs and charter schools versus ELs in the districts where those charter schools are located. After that, we are going to be talking with our colleagues in the field. What are they doing? What are their practices? How have they developed their programs for ELs? What have been strengths and challenges along the way? And what are the elements that they want to highlight to share with you as peers that are doing this work across the state in a similar context to yours? So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Michael, and he and I will walk you through this data.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, as we do structure these, we always see these as like a conversation where we start with the data, and Megan and I go through and we look for interesting things that come as a surprise, or things that reinforce what we see with ELs as a group. But it begins a conversation, it leads to questions. And where we then turn that over to our experts, our people who are in the field, our distinguished panelists, as they describe the experiences of their particular charter schools or districts. So it's kind of, we always like to look at this as a conversation between the data and on the ground experience. So with that being said, we'll first start by looking at this student population. And over this 5-year period from 1516 to 1920, charter school ELs really experienced a period of robust growth, going from just over 500 kids to over 800 English learners in charter schools. It's really quite remarkable growth. And as a percentage of all the kids in charter schools, they grew during this period from just over 6%, 6.4% to over 8% of all students in charter schools are currently an English learner. Next slide, please. And I apologize up front. The data geek and me put this slide together, but I'll walk you through it. It's a very easy concept. What we're looking at is for that 5-year period, let's take 2015-16 as a baseline and then say, what was the change in the number of students for each succeeding year, comparing it to that baseline of 15-16. And so the blue line are the ELs who are in charter schools, and the orange line are charter school students who are not ELs. And in that first year, 16-17, you see the ELs kind of remain flat, the number of ELs, less than a percentage change compared to 15-16. However, in the succeeding year, you start to see growth. The number of ELs grew by 13% in 17-18 compared to that baseline year of 15-16. And then in the next 2 years, that growth just rockets upward. 31% growth in 18-19 compared to that baseline. And then for the whole period ending 19-20, 63% growth in the number of ELs over this 5-year period in charter schools. That's really quite remarkable. And while it is a smaller number and larger growth numbers or changes in the number of kids is possible, still 63% is a very significant growth to be looking at. And just to kind of put that in perspective, during this same period for ELs as a whole in Connecticut, they also experienced growth, but that growth was 24%. So it is really remarkable that growth in charter school ELs is outstripping the growth for the state as a whole. And of course, you have differences in the size of groups, so it kind of makes sense, but still, it really is quite remarkable growth that's occurring in these districts. Megan and I were thinking about it. We kind of identified like 2 general categories here. One is sort of events that are beyond our control. Global events, and we always say this when we do these presentations, how much Connecticut ELs really reflect world events, where we see growth in the number of kids because of things like political instability, for example, in the Middle East, or the growth in the number of Arabic students, economic dislocations in Central or South America, we see fueling growth. And then natural disasters like Hurricane Maria or some of the earthquakes in Haiti and the growth of the number of our Creole Haitian students. But in addition to this, Megan will address some of the more man-made causes that have probably contributed to this growth in the number of ELs in charter schools.
Yeah, so in addition to those kind of world events and the considerations that are outside of our control, we know that in over the past few years, we have done a lot of charter renewal visits. An important part of the charter renewal process has been ensuring that there is a program in place for English learners and that there are structures in place to identify, annually assess, and support English learners. So we attribute that process potentially to being supportive of ensuring that English learners are identified and served. We also know that when ESSA came about, we were required to implement a statewide entrance procedure. And prior to that, districts utilized their own entrance procedures to determine if an English learner was in fact an English learner. Once ESSA was passed, we developed our statewide procedure, which made us be more intentional and consistent in district over district as to how we identify English learners. So in addition to, as Michael said, those worldwide events, we attribute those practices and procedures as contributing to the growth that we've seen in the charters.
Thanks, Megan. Next slide, please. When we look at the charters by the size of their L population, we do see some variation. First of all, I would say 21 of the 22 charter schools have at least one L. And we see a group of charter schools, 9 of them, that have fewer than 20 Ls. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have 8 that have 50 or more. And in fact, 2 of those schools have 100 or more Ls. And that would be Amistad and Achievement First in Bridgeport. So we've got quite a array in the size of population by school. Can we go back to that prior slide? But just like in the state, we have low incidence districts and then we have high incidence districts. But regardless of the individual size of the L population, there still is the need to provide services. But again, the size is important in that the program that's most appropriate for that population of students may vary by the number of students that are there. I don't know, Megan, if you wanted to add something here.
Yeah, and so the really essential piece to this is similar to what we see statewide in that, as Michael alluded, we have low incidence charter schools, we have kind of a more middle incidence charter schools, and then we have a few higher incidence charter schools. So we know that L populations differ across the different charter school environments. That's really consistent across the state as well. But to echo what Michael said, we know that if there's even one English learner in your district, you are obligated to provide a language instruction program for that student, and you are required to provide supports that will enable the student to be able to access general education grade level content. What those supports look like, though, likely will differ depending on the demographics of your charter school environment. And we have kind of some different contexts represented in our district experts today that will talk about what that looks like. So we envision this presentation to be kind of an initial sort of jumping off point. This is one slide that we see as a to be continued. So at some point, where does your school sit? Are you in the less than 20? Or do you have 50 plus Ls? What does your program look like? We envision, hopefully, being able to provide additional supports, resources, technical assistance, and that sort of thing as needed. As we kind of dig into and grapple with some of this data. So please keep that in mind as we're continuing. Note if there's something that really sticks out to you so that we can think about how to connect with you going forward on these topics as you're thinking about your own context.
And that's an excellent point, Megan. And Megan and I have already started some brainstorming to think through what topics might be useful to charter schools as well as other districts to provide this kind of technical support. And we've talked about maybe recording some sessions where we deal with very narrow topics of this is the ins and outs of how this particular process is done. So if you have ideas, please contact us because we would love to be able to provide that kind of information and support. Next slide, please. And here's a concept that I know Megan and I are very passionate about promoting, and it's the concept of EverL. EverL includes Ls, current Ls, but it also includes in this group monitored Ls. Now, monitored Ls by federal law are those students who have met mastery in the preceding 2 school years and are eligible for services if they need them, but also any kind of monitoring their academic progress. That's on the districts to be providing and making sure that those students, as they transition away from the language supports, that they're not just kind of abandoned, that they have the support as they move into accessing the academic material on their own. For ever Ls also includes what we're calling former Ls, those students who have moved beyond the monitoring period, so they met English mastery more than 2 years ago. But they may still have some English language needs. And why we think of this is important for a couple of reasons. One is when you look at just the concept of L versus not L, meaning just the current Ls versus students who are not currently in L, you miss a lot of the story of these kids, particularly in terms of the trajectory of their success over time. So when we start to look at ever L data, particularly in terms of if we look at performance on academic assessments, I think some of the gratifying thing is that we do see ever Ls can perform on a level of their never L students who are never in L peers in terms of maybe the academic assessments. And that story gets lost when you only think in terms of current L versus currently not in L. So that's one part. The other part is bearing in mind that though the students may have met the English mastery standard, they might still have some language needs. And as educators, knowing that may help knowing that may help you be aware that they might have some needs that can help them access the academic material. Now, when we look at the student population and we think about ever L, 14% of students in charter schools would fit this concept of ever L, meaning either they're a current L or they were an L at some point during their public school education. So that's a pretty significant population, and that's about what it is for the state as a whole. 14% of Connecticut public school students are in ever L. Megan, did you want to?
So I think, I think you captured the ever L definition really well. And I think that the other piece that's important to note is for all of us, we are lifelong learners. We're lifelong language learners, even in our primary language. We are, consistently learning, more language, more vocabulary. So that would be the case with our ever L students as well in English. The other piece to think of is multilingual families. So ever Ls or English learners in general often come from multilingual families, and multilingual families may need support in languages other than English. And so that is something to take into account. That is, we could talk about how to support multilingual families, in certainly like a whole other session or a whole other day training. It's a large topic, but it is something to consider. So that's another reason to kind of beware of that ever L status, that families may need multilingual supports.
Good. Next slide, please. In terms of the native language of students in Ls in charter schools, we see predominantly it's Spanish. 81% of Ls in charter schools have a native language of Spanish. However, it's also important to note that among all Ls in charter schools, there are 32 different native languages requiring support. So you have a number of low incidence languages, as I'm sure you're all aware, that you need to provide supports for. Two things jumped out at us as we looked at this graph. Firstly, obviously, the predominance of Spanish. Overall, for the state as a whole, 72% of our English learners have a native language of Spanish. But what's interesting is in the districts that have a charter school, so sort of trying to do an apples to apples comparison, about 83% of Ls in those public school districts that have a charter school within their boundaries are Spanish speakers. So the 81% sort of made sense. One thing that also caught our attention is for the state as a whole, 5.5% of our English learners have a native language of Portuguese. And when you look at this graph, you don't see that listed there. It's part of that 27 other languages piece of the pie. So it's less than 1% of charter school Ls have a native language of Portuguese, which kind of came as a surprise. Even when, again, you look at the public school districts that have a charter school within their boundaries, still 3% of those districts have their L's speak Portuguese. So this came as quite a surprise. I know, but Megan had some thoughts on that.
So we know that there are very kind of detailed processes for how students become enrolled in charter schools through lotteries and processes like that. But we also know that there's some level of community engagement, of course, that happens as well. And so we wondered perhaps if this is reflective of the kind of community spreading of kind of news about about a school. That's one of the things I've had the privilege of participating in charter renewal visits, and it's something that's very often noted, particularly by the parents and community, that they've heard about the school. Their interest was elevated about the school by their neighborhood, people in their neighborhood, by their peers throughout their community. And so we wondered if that had something to do with why we see a little bit kind of different trends in the English learner, the languages of English learners in charter schools, based on that community interest that is sort of organically shared as the school is promoted and advertised. We're not sure, but that was our guess, and and we would certainly, like with these others, we're looking at numbers and kind of thinking anecdotally and thinking about our experiences, what we've been told, our interactions with folks at the charter schools, to sort of fill in the blanks, like when they leave us wondering what accounts for these changes, what accounts for these numbers. And so we defer to you on these as the experts of your context and knowing your students to say, yeah, that probably is it, or you're off the mark here, and we look forward to having those conversations further.
Next slide, please. And I apologize for the number of bars here, but let's walk through. And here what we're trying to do is make some comparisons that kind of highlight the uniqueness of the Charter L population. So we've included a number of groups here for purposes of comparison. We're looking at grades. So the blue bar refers to the charter school Ls. For comparison purposes, that sort of orange bar, those are Ls who are in public school districts that have a charter school within their boundaries. The gray bar are charter school students who are not Ls, not currently Ls, and then the yellow bar are public school students who are not Ls, in those districts that have a charter in their boundaries. So when we look in terms of grade band, predominantly 61%, that blue bar, are pre-K to 5, and really it's K to 5, because pre-K identification of a student as an L is totally optional depending on the discretion of the district. So very few districts identify pre-K kids as L or not. So really we're talking K to 5. 61% of them are in those younger grades. That's a little bit higher than L's in public school districts that have a charter, and certainly higher than charter school students who are not L's. What was interesting, though, what really caught our eye is the last set of bars, those kids who are in high school, grades 9 to 12. Only 12% of charter school L's are in grades 9 to 12. Compared with their peers who are in public school districts and are L's, that's almost less than half as a percentage. And even comparing with that gray bar of charter school kids who are not L's, 20% of charter school L's or charter school students who are not L are in high school, compared to only 12% of charter school L's. So that really kind of caught our attention. Why so few high school L's in charter schools? Megan, did you?
Yep. And so we had a couple thoughts about this. One is that we know that in traditional public districts, we have English learners, along with other students, are arriving all the time. So while we get the predominance of English learners are coming in at the earlier grades, we know that we're getting late arrival Ls. That's very consistent, and it's particularly a trend in our large urban centers. And so in our large urban centers is where the majority of our charter schools reside. So we would see in those districts that there are going to be some late arrival Ls. And when a student is incoming, we're hypothesizing here that it's less likely for a late arrival L to enter into a charter school because essentially a student would be kind of getting the lay of the land of the district. There would be fewer slots available in the charter schools because many charter schools, are bringing their students kind of up through the ranks over the grade levels and the grade spans. And it may be less likely that our late arrival students would be aware of the charter school option. So we were guessing that that is likely what could be contributing to that lower number of secondary Ls in charters.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we wanted to look at a couple of key demographics of students. We're kind of bearing in mind that the importance of looking at the whole student, the different characteristics. So we wanted to look at eligibility for free and reduced priced meals, students with disabilities, and immigrant students. So again, it's that same setup. The blue bars are the charter school Ls, and what we see is really the charter school Ls in terms of eligibility for free and reduced priced lunch are on par with their public school L counterparts. And really, I mean, thinking about these districts, we would figure most of the students, as we see from the other bars, most of these students are going to be eligible for that anyway. And so they're certainly on par with their peers there. In terms of students with disabilities, I think first of all, what's interesting is comparing the charter school Ls, the blue bar, with the gray bar, the charter school students who are not Ls. And we see that gap of, 18% of charter school Ls are also identified as students with disabilities compared to 10% of their not L peers. And actually, this is consistent with the rest of the state. There's always, when we look at it, there's always this kind of 7 or 8% gap between those two groups, between Ls and students who are not Ls in terms of identification for special ed. So this is not particularly surprising to us. The comparison of the charter school Ls with the Ls in the public school districts, there's a little bit of a gap, a little fewer percentage of these kids, but it's not, it's not a yawning gap. In terms of immigrants, and immigrants are defined as students who have been in a U.S. public school for fewer than 3 years. What we see is largely there are very few immigrant students in charter schools, regardless of whether they're an L or not. So that that sort of stood us out to us a little bit.
Yeah, and that kind of supports the prior point that we were making on the prior slide about those late arrival Ls. We can infer that that orange bar, the right-hand orange bar, is telling us that we have late arrival Ls in the districts that are immigrants. Yet we can see that that number is quite distinct from the number of students that would have arrived within the last 3 years that are Ls that are enrolling in the charter school. So that added additional kind of weight to our thinking about why there are fewer secondary Ls in the charter schools.
Good point. Thank you. Next slide, please. And in terms of the English language support programs that ELS and charter schools are receiving. Two things kind of stood out to us. One is the percentage of kids who are, and this is based on your reporting to the state's student database, PSIS. 60% of charter schools were reported as receiving ESL other, some other mix of different types of services. For the state as a whole, this percentage is only 13%. And so this kind of certainly got our attention as to, curiosity of what is actually being offered, because ESL other really doesn't tell us anything or tell us much. The other thing that stood out was the small number of kids being reported as receiving transitional bilingual services. We know that in 2019-20, 7 different charter schools were identified, and the state has, as per the law, we have a standardized process for identifying schools for offering a mandated bilingual program, and that's based on having 20 English learners in a building who have the same native language. And so in the following year, they're mandated to offer a bilingual program. So for 2019, 7 charter schools were mandated to offer this. 4 refused the funds and did not offer a program, but 3 still did. So there should have been more than 7 Ls being reported in our student databases receiving transitional bilingual. And so when Megan and I were thinking about this, we were thinking, and going back to that other point about providing support, this might be something that maybe we record a quick little seminar on coding, program coding, the proper way of program coding, so that we can accurately understand what's being offered to our English learners in charter schools.
And we encourage you to reach out to us about these questions. So we know that over time, the structure of programs for English learners in a district, in any district, whether it's a charter district or a traditional public school district, is likely to change. We see that there's this growth of ELs, of course, as we saw in the initial slides, and likely over time, with the growth of English learners statewide, we will see a change in programs. We are guessing that perhaps ESL Other may be a little bit of a reflective of past practice. Maybe it's been a habit of districts, charter schools, to report ESL Other, and consistently when you're looking at the information system and ensuring that students are in with a particular program, it said ESL Other last year. That sounds approximately right this year, so we keep it as is. It might be reflective of past practice. ESL Other may be also a combination of pushing in and pulling out in your district. So perhaps you're doing, you're structuring an ESL program that does a variety of things. And so ESL Other to you is what fits best. So, I mean, that makes sense, but it would be interesting for us if we could engage in a conversation to delve into that a little bit more. And similarly, that transitional bilingual mandate that Michael alluded to, we know that districts that are mandated to provide bilingual programs are obligated to provide those programs as long as one child that is mandated to provide bilingual, his family or her family has opted that child in. So if every family declines bilingual services, a mandated bilingual district is not required to provide a bilingual program. However, that is not typical. Generally speaking, when you have 20 or more speakers of the same non-English native language and are mandated to provide a bilingual program, there's generally going to be at least a subset of that 20 or more that do opt in. What a transitional bilingual program looks like differs widely. So while it may be a very, very robust program that has a distinct teacher and classroom in some contexts, In other contexts, that's going to be a native language support person providing native language support for those children who have been opted into the program on a kind of as needed basis, or a few times a week basis, in a push-in or a pull-out model. So there are many different things that comprise a bilingual program depending on the context of your district. And so, as Michael said, it would be unusual for us to only see 7 students total statewide in charter schools that are getting this bilingual program. So this seems like an opportunity for growth and for us to kind of collaborate with you to ensure that we're conveying what the codes, what we mean by the codes, and you're clear on how to identify your students and the codes that they should have within your specific context. And
Thanks, Megan.
So at this point,
now that we've, go ahead.
Okay. So at this point, Michael and I are going to turn it over to our first panelist. We're very lucky to be joined by Mary Newberry of Side by Side Charter School, who is going to walk us through what the English Learner Program looks like there, and some of the challenges and strengths that the program has met along the way. So Mary, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you this morning. I'm sorry my camera's not being read by the app, so this is just a microphone talk. So Side by Side, has been in the community about 23 years. And over that time, the L population has shifted considerably. Certainly in the last 5 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of L's entering our kindergarten. And I think it really reflects the trajectory of the data that Michael and Megan shared with us. So, about 2 years ago, administration had been talking with teachers and really recognizing that the needs of the L population were outpacing the program that we were offering. We knew we were going to hit that 20 student mark soon. We thought it would be this year. We actually hit it last year. So we had, and when we began talking about budgeting last year, we had budgeted for a full-time TESOL or bilingual elementary education certified teacher. So we are in year 1 of having a program that offers a bilingual transitional program. The reasons, were more than just numbers, and I really want to emphasize that. Our data was indicating that it was taking longer for the kids in front of us to achieve last link's criteria levels of English proficiency. Previously, pretty much kids were testing out somewhere around 4th and 5th grade. And we were monitoring them in middle school, and this was no longer the case. More and more kids were entering middle school with intermediate levels of English proficiency. And because of this, they were requiring greater levels of support to successfully access that core curriculum. And the other piece of this, I think that's really important to state, is that these kids and their families were demonstrating more complex needs. So, at this point, it was we need to adapt our program to the kids in front of us. And I think the number one thing that I say all the time to everybody is, whenever this happens and we need to make some changes, we ask for help. So I'm very lucky that I've been part of the CES RESC's ELL roundtables, so that I know the other districts that have low incidence populations, and those ESL teachers have been really helpful to me over the years. When we realized we were making this shift, the distress call to Megan in the spring was, okay, we need to move, we need to shift our program. Tell me what this might look like given our setting. And so, after asking for help, we decided to make some changes. So if we could go to the next slide. So these shifts were both in terms of our instructional model, but also in our approach to supporting our EL families as a school community. So, one of the things that's been really, really important to us is that, you know, our classroom teachers need to be really well trained in language acquisition, regardless of whether or not they're TESOL teachers. And so when we looked for a TESOL teacher to replace our ELL tutor model that we previously had, we wanted someone that was going to be able to not only provide good, solid support for our students, but also be a collaborator with our general education teachers. So with this new model, what we've done is we've hired a full-time TESOL teacher. Due to shortages, we really were not able to find a bilingual elementary Spanish teacher. And so we went with a TESOL teacher, and we also hired a Spanish-speaking tutor to support those children whose families opted into the bilingual transitional program. This is a work in progress. We are in year 1 of this model, and we are also in the middle of a pandemic. So, one of the challenges has been, okay, in a regular year, we had certain goals for this program, and those goals have really had to shift to meet the needs of families across the school. And particularly, it's almost like a triage model with the L's, that the kids who have the less support at home are getting more service hours. But all kids are receiving TESOL instruction every week, and the kids who've opted for bilingual transitional are receiving that support as well. If you could change the slide. So, our real goals for this year's program was, number 1, to reallocate some resources, and number 2, to really provide some high quality professional development for the team based on this new model. So the biggest thing is that a TESOL instructor and a bilingual tutor are now part of our operating budget. And that may seem like, well, yeah, duh, but the reality is we're a single stream revenue, very small mom and pop charter school. So that's a big decision for us. So making that shift was really an investment in enhancing our L program here. And then we took a bunch of our Title II funds this year and really focused on literacy and language acquisition for our early elementary schools, our special education teacher, and our TESOL teacher. And they're working as a team, and every several weeks they're doing professional development together around oral language, around morphology, around syntax, and all those things that are going to help them implement the KELP standards in the classroom and be able to have professional conversations about student learning in ways where everybody's sharing expectations in common language. And I think that's really, really important, because no matter what we talk about, we know that highly trained, highly qualified teachers have the greatest impact on children. So we really want to focus our efforts there in these first couple of years. Our model incorporates both a push in and pull out instructional blocks for the TESOL teacher based on the needs of the children. And if you could go to the next slide. And lastly, I just want to say really quickly, our school mission is social justice. And I know that word means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but we really have always had a much larger, quote unquote L population that was indicated in the data. Because we have a 2-year preschool prior to kindergarten, many children didn't qualify for official L services in kindergarten because they scored high on the last links. But those kids were still, acquiring English as a second or third language all the way through the years. So, one of the things I think we do the best is that, we really build relationships with our families and develop trust. Social work support has been crucial for our families in the last few years. The shift in immigration policies at the national level has led to new stressors for many of our families, and really sustaining that level of trust has been, really primary work for our support team here at Side by Side. And then other smaller things that we're constantly trying to do better. One of the things the teacher expressed is that, you know, we meet with our L parents every year. We really take a lot of time in explaining to them program options and stuff. But what we don't want to do is start having L family events or L this. But really, we want to make sure that our whole school community and all our events and activities are accessible to everybody. So one of the ideas that, you know, our classroom teachers brought forward was we have a lot of bilingual families who could be buddy families to monolingual families in classrooms. And that's really, really helped with families fully understanding classroom and school culture. Something we're currently working on is how to better link our FRC to the needs of this increasing L population, particularly at the preschool, early childhood level. So those are the things we're working on. We have a long way to go. I think we're just in a you know, a transitional phase, and we're really trying to just leverage what has worked for us really well, and acquire a new skill set and build some new systems that are gonna meet the needs of the children in front of us. So thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that information, Mary. It's really interesting to hear how Side by Side has worked to develop structures for English learners and their multilingual families, the reallocation of grant funds and supporting PD for generalists. We know that, of course, a lot of serving Ls is where the rubber hits the road is that general education environment, and having our generalist teachers, our grade level teachers, have the skills, the necessary and requisite skills and strategies to be able to support English learners in those environments. So supporting the general educators through PD, and coupled with being able to, you know, choosing to budget for L experts. I mean, that's really exciting to hear, along with your strategies for supporting families. So thank you. And I would like to now turn it over to Joanne Meehan of Capital Prep Harbor.
Wait, so she introduces the next person?
Sounds like it.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. Good morning. I'm Joanne Meehan. As Megan said, I'm the TESOL teacher at Capital Prep Harbor School in Bridgeport. We're a K-12 school. I was hired in August of 2019 to work with 8 currently identified EL scholars in the school. And by October 2018, I had identified 54 scholars using the home language survey, and then the pre-loss, last placement, and also the state website, EdSite. Once the scholars were identified, I began to support our ELs from grades K through 12 in 2 buildings. Then the pandemic hit, and we began shifting to online learning for the remainder of the year. As the year continued, we began discussing hiring an additional EL illuminator, a teacher, to support for the coming year. And then in the summer of 2020, we were mandated to have a bilingual program in Spanish. So we hired a bilingual TESOL teacher in August of 2020 to start the year. And she works with our bilingual TESOL students across the district, K through 12 also. Next slide. Thank you. Capital Prep is a social justice school. We have a rigorous curriculum, especially our ELA, history, and our social justice classrooms. Each of our lessons, we also include our learner expectations. We use the acronym CPREP, collaborator, problem solver, researcher, empathetic citizen, and pillars of knowledge. We also have advisory every day. Each of the teachers in our school has a mixed age group of students, either K through 2nd grade or 3rd through 6th grade. My advisory group is all Ls in grades 3 through 6. This year I'm working with them on social emotional learning skills. We do daily check-ins, group collaborative projects, journals, mindfulness, affirmation. And we also call all the families in our advisory bi-weekly to connect with them, to share reminders, updates at school, positives in the classroom, and also some concerns we have, and we will answer any questions the families have. Our EL program has evolved, starting with TESOL a year ago and bilingual and TESOL this year. We do co-planning as a team, offering modifications, differentiation in the classroom and with classwork. Our lessons focus on vocabulary, language, comprehension skills, and we make connections with their prior knowledge and experiences. We offer language translation and also cognates as needed in each of the lessons. Our program includes push-in, small group, individualized instruction. And I'm very proud that last year we awarded the seal of biliteracy to one of our scholars. So that was a new program for us, and we're hoping to continue it in the coming years. Next slide. Our home school connections. We work very hard to connect with our families. Virtual learning has presented a number of challenges for us, as I'm sure it has for many schools. We had multiple town hall meetings in August, September, October, the beginning of the school year, to provide families with updated information. During these presentations, we had translation, and also when necessary, we offered separate meetings for our EL families. We've also done videos that the families can access on our website to help them use Zoom, Google Classroom, iReady, Zern, and the other programs that our scholars use. And again, these are available for our EL families, some of them in their home language. Last year we did monthly family nights, but due to COVID, they've been canceled for this year. But it was important that we reached out to our L families, inviting them to our presentations last year so they could find out some games, websites, encouraging them to read and discuss topics at home that they're learning in school in their home language. We do student-led conferences for our parent-family conferences. The scholars share what they're learning and how they're graded. And then weekly, we reach out to the families. We've been doing a lot of robocalls for attendance, reminders, alerts for families for important dates, testing dates, classroom reminders, asking them to pick up books and materials, especially for our distance learners. And this year, we're also hoping to offer an English language class to our families so they can become more involved in the schools and their child's learning, and also be more comfortable at parent conferences, participate. Last slide. So we meet with our classroom teachers and support staff, as well as our SPED team every week. So we can support our students and learn about the lessons the teachers will be presenting. And we make sure that we know what the school ELs will need to succeed in the classroom. And we also share data at these meetings. And we offer PDs to our teachers about ELs, scaffolding, supports, whatever the teachers need, depending on their needs. Online learning has been a challenge. Our parents are given the choice for our L students to attend in person 4 days a week, and we encourage them to do so. We also offer distance learning if they're more comfortable, or hybrid to come in 2 days a week. Most of our students are choosing the 4 days a week. So that is helping in their success. Another concern is the fidelity of the scholars' work. We're having a lot of parents participate in some of the students' work, so we want to make sure that we're obtaining accurate information. And the other thing is the fidelity of the testing, state and district, that we will be doing. soon. Our concerns are due to the internet, computer issues, attendance. So we're hoping that that will all work out. Another one of our challenges is the fluidity of our students who register at our school throughout the year and need to assess when they arrive, determine any gaps in their learning, and we use EdSite to determine their eligibility and LostLink scores. And I just want to give a shout out to Michael Sabatos for EdSite. We've used that a lot. It saved us a lot of time, and I really appreciate all the work he does for us. And thank you, Megan, for inviting me today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Joanne. And we promise we didn't tell Joanne she had to make a note of EdSite there, but that is something that Michael and I kind of envision as another one of those presentations down the line, or a seminar, or a little opportunity to connect. How does EdSite work for you? How can it work for you? And are you sure that you know all of its all of the things that you can do with it? We would like to have some sort of working session on that topic. So thanks for bringing that up, Joanne. Also, Joanne, I want to thank you and say it was really interesting to listen to how your program has adapted and grown. As a person who's lucky enough to go on the renewal visits, I get to see the unique culture of each individual charter school and how you really cultivate that with intentionality in your unique contexts. And so that's really present at Capital Prep, that unique culture. And so instead of really reinventing the wheel, I see that you're kind of adapting the wheel and making it more accessible for all of the students. And so it's really neat to see that work in practice and to hear you discussing it. So thanks again. And now I would like to turn it over to Alejandra Corona Ortega and David Weinreb from Elm City Montessori in New Haven.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alejandra Corona. I am an assistant guide at Elm City Montessori. This is my second year at the school. Yeah, thank you.
And I'm Dave Weiner. Buenos dias. Hola a todos. I serve as the magnet resource teacher here at Elm City Montessori. I want to say that we are the state's only local charter. We're a charter of New Haven Public Schools. We serve pre-K through 6th grade students, growing up to 8th grade here in New Haven. I should also mention that Alejandra and I have both received training through ACES ARCTEL, which Pedro Mendia, who will be speaking after us, has generously advocated for and supported, and which we're tremendously grateful for. Our English learner work at Elm City Montessori is absolutely a work in progress, like our colleagues have shared. And we have a lot to learn from everyone on this call. Today, we're going to focus on where our Montessori model intersects with some of the universal design principles that the Connecticut community of English learner practitioners commonly center. And here are our children. A brief introduction to Montessori pedagogy in the next 5 to 7 minutes. We believe completely in the importance of hands-on kinesthetic learning as core practice. Here you can see a number of our students working with materials. Montessori is very materials based. They're expensive too, in case you're ever wondering about purchasing your own set. Students from the pre-K stage all the way up through our middle school program are using purposefully color-coded and aligned materials that trend and that connect. You can see in the bottom right corner an image of virtual Montessori materials, because even in the past year, people have gotten creative, and we're still working to make sure that that some of those visual representations, that like what starts concrete and moves to pictorial and moves to abstract, the work that we talk about all the time as English language learner practitioners also shows up meaningfully in the Montessori space. Ale.
Thank you, Dave. Could you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. One of the ideologies of Montessori is sort of small group and individualized lesson presentations. You very, very rarely would present a lesson to the entire classroom. They normally have to do with community building or rituals for the safety of the classroom, but for any of the other lessons, math, reading, it's definitely individualized or small group. And because of that, there's built-in differentiation. There's also, I, as a person who's in the classroom, I am able to make one small group of one kid who needs extra support. And we have 2 ELs in my classroom, 1 EL in person, and she is able, I'm able to have one meeting with her one-on-one every single day as an ELL, even though, you know, she doesn't have an ELL teacher in the classroom. And another part of the Montessori curriculum is the mixed age environments. We have kids that go by 3 grades. So in my classroom, we have 4th, 5th, in some 6th graders in other classrooms, but that's sort of the environment as we keep growing. And so even though 2 of our ELs are, one is in 4th grade and one is in 5th grade, I would potentially be able to pull them together and have a lesson with them because they are in the same classroom still. And finally, because of this, these small groups, we still want to acknowledge that even though they're not learning the same lesson at the same time, we want to give them and provide them with opportunities to discover new ideas and talk with their friends while learning. And so we focus on both this social language, but also this academic language. And here's what we're referencing in BICS and CALP, thanks to Commons theory. And so in Montessori, we are able to, as you can see in the bottom left corner, we have a group of students. 2 of them are 5th graders, 2 of them are 4th graders, but they're all learning about the timeline of life. And they're all outside. And so that's what is going to be the next slide. David?
Yeah. So even during distance learning, hybrid learning, COVID pandemic times, we know who we're serving, and we understand that their needs are great and significant, and that we have a responsibility to be fulfilling them. Outdoor learning has been a piece of that work. Our outdoor learning program actually blossomed in the past year, and we believe that to be important not just for the current health and safety requirements of this moment, but actually it's like critical and core to what Montessori believes should be happening with children and their development, and that I believe as an educator, like all children need, as a form of helping students get in touch with realia and with their real world and have authentic practice with what they're learning. You can see here that our school is located next to West Rock Ridge State Park, which is a tremendous gift and privilege and opportunity. Alejandro, you'll talk about the book in a moment, if you would. Yeah, we use this as our classroom. Nature is our classroom. Our students who have come from other places, we see it as our responsibility to help them become stewards of this land. We see that as part of being trauma-informed practitioners. And we see outdoor learning as something that needs to happen for our pre-K children who may be struggling to engage in a distance learning format. And for our oldest students, as I mentioned before, we're currently up to 6th grade. We're going to be launching our 7th and 8th grade program. And our 7th and 8th grade program, get excited. It's farm-based. There's tons of outdoor education. Our principal has promised that there could be a goat involved. So stay tuned, because there's a lot more outdoor learning that's going to be coming in our school. And we're so excited to see the ways in which that's going to meaningfully impact the experience for all of our students, including our English learners.
Thank you, Dave. And just for the last 2 points, as Dave mentioned, even during this crazy period of COVID, we have been able to continue in-person learning, rather let it be outside. And we, even now that we are in the classroom, there are parents who feel still comfortable coming into the classroom, but there are parents who don't feel comfortable sending their kids in, but they still can opt in for outdoor learning. And so that is an option because we're always outside for those 2.5 hours a week. And so parents are able to come in, drop off their kids, and know that, you know, they're still all outside. The things that we want to also highlight here at the school is that we have a full-time Dean of Social Emotional Learning. And this year we have an anti-bias, anti-racist director. These are two wonderful women who take this work very seriously, because Montessori and sort of any sort of pedagogy is a tool, but if it's not used through an anti-bias and anti-racist lens, if it's not trauma-informed, if it's not trying to also build the social emotional skills that we want to see in every child and every adult, then that tool can be misused. And so we want to highlight that. David referenced the book on the bottom left corner, Giving Thanks. And so that's part of our One Book, One School model program here in the school. And so basically we read a book a month that is written, and it's for the lived experiences of people of color or indigenous communities in this case. And so Giving Thanks is about that ability to connect to nature and giving thanks and being stewards of that land, while also acknowledging that this land, as beautiful as it is not something we are reinventing. This is not like the idea of stewardship is not something we are reinventing and discovering. It's something that has been passed down through indigenous communities. And so our students are taught to honor those experiences and make sure that they understand the importance of centering those indigenous communities when we do anything in nature. I think we're all set, right, David?
Yes, thank you so much,
including us,
Alejandra and Dave, for sharing a little bit more about your context. We really appreciate it. One of the things that strikes me, and just like I said with the previous two speakers, the culture of a school is immediately evident in a charter school, and that Montessori model is so omnipresent as soon as you are walking in those doors. And so it's just wonderful to hear you describe the ways that you are implementing culturally relevant and culturally sustaining pedagogy and practices and strategies in that that model for all students, but also that really deeply support English learners and with intentionality because of your unique areas of expertise that you bring to the table. So thank you very much for sharing. And at this point, I will be turning over the presentation to Pedro Mendia of New Haven Public Schools. I'd like to note before Pedro begins that we requested, when we were planning this presentation, we wanted to certainly highlight and talk about the unique contexts of charter schools, but also to think about how charter schools and the districts in which they are located interact. We know that charter schools are unique, standalone public school districts, but they are unique in that they are bringing in residents of various communities, or in the case of Elm City, one community. And so naturally and organically, there has to be some level kind of collaboration. So Pedro was willing to talk about this in terms of the New Haven context. So appreciate that. And Pedro, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, buenos dias. It is an honor to be here this morning learning from you and with you on the ways that you are supporting the multilingual learner populations in your setting. I am Pedro Mendia Landa, and I'm the director of the multilingual learner programs for the New Haven Public Schools. And notice that in New Haven, we have begun making the shift of describing our population as just more English learners. They really are multilingual learners. And so through the presentation, you might hear me referring to them as such. I'm going to begin first by describing who our learners are, which are the programs that we have to offer, and how and why we support their development in the way that we do. That is, what is the philosophical underpinnings or understandings, non-negotiables that we have in place as a district. I will then describe the ways that New Haven Public School indirectly supports the charter schools. As Megan said, the majority of the students attending the charter schools in New Haven are part of our New Haven, population. And finally, I'm going to end my remarks by listing some aspirational ways in which I feel that we can collaborate together. So who are our multilingual learners? Our multilingual learners represent about 19% of the student population in the New Haven Public Schools. So out of the 19,972 students or thereabouts, 3,547 are identified as multilingual learners. This is a very diverse population. So there are 47 different languages that are represented, and there is representation from 65 different countries. 82%, or a little bit more, are, their primary language is Spanish, which I think that that correlates or aligns with the numbers and the figures that Michael was giving us earlier in this presentation this morning. The second largest language group is made out of our Pashto population, that is 6.4%, followed by Arabic speakers, then Mandarin and Dari. Again, the alignment between the numbers in New Haven Public Schools and the state, I think that they are very similar. So about 50% of our L population is enrolled in K-5. We have very few students, if any, in the pre-K. Something that is important to note, in terms of our multilingual population, is that the majority of them are born in the United States or in one of the territories. So it is not, there tends to be a belief right there that the majority of our English learners or multilingual learners are foreign born, and that is not the case. And I think that, the body of research, it also reflects that. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So as you know, New Haven Public Schools, it's a pretty large district, in terms of the number of students and in terms of the schools that we have programs in. So pretty much in every single of the 43 schools, we do have an English learners. And what we do is we provide them with either a biliteracy model in terms of the programming that they have, or an ESOL that is supports to develop just their English. And why is it that we do? Besides the fact that we have a law both at the federal and the state level that speaks about all students deserving access to an equitable education, and that is their right and our responsibility to provide it, our work is also grounded on a set of beliefs that anchors our practices, in which I think that hearing your presentations we would agree. And that is that all students deserve access to that equitable education. And something that is very unique, to the New Haven Public Schools, and that it has been a goal of mine as the director, is that all students can achieve bilingualism, biliteracy, and sociocultural competence. And that's why in New Haven we have emphasized in transitioning our traditional bilingual programs more to enrichment, either one-way or two-way immersion programs, where again, we see what all the families bring as assets, specifically the linguistic assets that they bring, and we want to make sure that they maintain the language and the culture. And in addition, we also give the differentiation of instruction and ongoing support that multilingual learners will acquire content, academic vocabulary, and the needed language skills to make grade level standards and expectations. So that is the why, our beliefs. Next slide, please. So in terms of the how to support our students, so we support them, we are guided by some non-negotiables that have been shared with all the stakeholders and that are critical in that they outline the given structures and ways of supporting the students and the ways in which we must collaborate so that we can address the needs, so that we can determine and develop their individual needs based in looking at their academic, linguistic, and sociocultural profile. So it is critical that all the stakeholders understand who our students are, and that is true of all of our programs, that we are addressing the individual needs of the students. Some key instructional practices that we have across the district is such as self-instruction. We know that are beneficial for all of our students, but they are critical for our multilingual learners as we contribute to their progress in the 4 language domains of speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Of course, the integration of social emotional learning across the curriculum, it is, a very important asset. And we putting a lot of emphasis, at least as part of a continuous improvement plan, of looking at our assessments and making use of more portfolio assessments that are aligned to the Connecticut English Language Proficiency Standards. Next slide, please. So what are some of the ways in which we currently collaborate with our, charter schools? As you can see, we have at least 6 schools: Amistad, City College Preparatory, Booker T. Washington, Highville Charter, City Montessori, which, as Dave and Alejandra explained, it is a city charter school, and then a Common Ground charter schools. So these schools, although they were not outlined in the graph that I showed you earlier of the different programs, I mean, they are part of the, New Haven school community. So as part of the school choice process, all our pre-K students whose primary language is other than English, they are screened to determine the program qualification. And we meet with the families to explain to them what are the program options with the assumption that these families are going to remain with us, okay? Those students are then coded in our student information system. And once the lottery takes place, and some of the schools, such as I believe that is City College Prep, they have their own, lottery, but they also assign specific seats, to participate, so that our families in the district-wide lottery, they can participate or have access to attending that school. So all of the students, will go ahead and opt in, participate, and they can request that they attend one of those charter schools. That information, as I said, is entered in our student information system, and it is historical in nature. So that means that there is tends to be movement from public to charter, and then from charter to public, that as the students move in and out, at least we already know who are the families who are identified. Next slide, please. So, I mean, what further collaboration, aspirational could we have to make the work or the collaboration that we already have in place that make it, I guess, more stronger? So one of the things that I don't think that it is done systematically, and it needs to be done systematically, is how is it that we communicate that these students have already been identified. And this is something that I'm not 100% certain that it does happen, because many of the charter schools have their own student information systems. So that information that it is coded within Power School, it might not be transferred. So I think that one of the steps that we need to take is just make sure that that communication is there. I know that with City Montessori, they have access to the same student information system, and Dave is really good at picking up the phone and saying, hey, what's going on? I need this student I feel that, you know, should be identified as an L and has not, so we can have that communication. But I think that we need to systematically probably create some pathways to communicate with the other charter schools. The idea of sharing professional development, as I began, you know, my remarks this morning by saying that I'm learning from you, the way that you are, you know, supporting the multilingual learners. If you have professional development, if we have professional development, if we can have opportunities, you know, to participate or to collaborate in that respect. Maybe the idea of having classroom and school visitations or having case studies where we can, you know, discuss, you know, the unique needs of some of the students, you know, and how is it that we approach them from the public school perspective, or how is it that you approach, you know, the needs of those students. Again, there are plenty of program resources that, as you can imagine, in a large district as we are, that we have had and we have had access, but I know that you also have many resources. So is there a way that we could, you know, come up with a bank of resources? And lastly, I would say that oftentimes we don't know who to call, you know, who is the person that is in charge in one charter school or at the district level. So maybe not only within New Haven, but within the state, whether we can have some sort of a directorate that possibly it already exists. I mean, I know that I have contact with administrators from programs from across the state because of the organization of which I'm a member of CAPEL. And possibly there is an organization of, such as that one that addresses the needs of charter schools, but just having maybe a common directory where you can, you know, just pick it up and make, you know, a phone call. Finally, I just have a slide with some key resources and references. You know, I'm not going to go over it. I mean, I think that many of you are already familiar with the CUP standards. The CUP linguistic supports is an amazing document. And some of those other documents that I put in this slide, there are some, I guess, tools, you know, in terms of distant and remote learning and technology that have been useful for our teachers. So having said that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to, you know, be here this morning. Megan?
Thanks so much, Pedro, for kind of bringing that around and describing, you know, potentially aspirationally how districts can, how, you know, traditional public school districts can potentially collaborate and connect with charter schools in their communities. I think that, again, this is kind of an opportunity for growth. And so we encourage you to not only collaborate internally with your charter school colleagues, but also to connect with the districts to ensure that we're having better ongoing communication, and ideally a system for it, so that if a person shifts in their role or, you know, a new person is hired, that continuity of communication is maintained. It's not person specific, but there's a system in place. So it's something I see that we could be working on all together, both as traditional public school staff, charter school staff, and folks at the CSDE. At this point, I would like to thank Pedro, Joanne, Alejandra, Dave, and Mary for their contributions and sharing their important experiences. I would like to ask our panelists to share their cameras if they feel so inclined. Michael and I did create these questions for kind of two purposes. One, if we had extra time today, we're never quite sure if we're going to have extra time, no time, etc. We thought we could talk through these. However, we did receive a question that I think really resonates with some of the comments that you all made, and especially Pedro just made, from our one of our attendees. I have posted that in the chat for the panelists, so you can see it there, but I am also going to read it in a moment. But I would like to say, in terms of these discussion topics, I encourage you folks that are in attendance to have these discussions with your colleagues. internally, how can, in particular, that first one, how can district charter relationships be enhanced to better support ELs? And the second, how can the CSDE better support and collaborate with you regarding your L needs? What can we do? We're always eager to hear. And whether it's reaching out to myself or Michael or going through Felicia, Shakira, and Rob, who are your real charter school back and forth folks at the CSDE, we work together internally often, and so we are eager to hear that feedback. Now, for our last few minutes before we close out, I'm going to read the question that we received, and thank you to the person who asked it. She writes, how are schools ensuring the fidelity of their scholars' learning? We use GoGuardian and are close with our families and still have difficulty obtaining accurate student data in regard to skill levels and test scores. She also said, thanks to all for sharing. I'm learning so much and you're working so hard. Very grateful. So thanks for that, those nice comments. And I open it up to you on how you are able to have a sense of students' learning. And that may pertain to a data system, information sharing, getting information from districts, something of that nature.
We're really small, so I want to start by saying that we only have one class per grade. So some of the monitoring that we're able to do is, you know, it's a little bit unique because of the small population we have, but pretty much all our assessments are being done with an actual teacher watching those assessments happen or being administered in small groups of like 2 and 3 children. That way there's no assessment happening where kids can get extra help when we really want to find out what their current levels of performance are. That's much easier to do when you have a small population. And our model is we have a teacher and an assistant who is often either a certified teacher or a full year student teacher in the classroom. And we have Title I support. So we have a lot of extra personnel that can actually help with the administration of assessments. And we've definitely faced similar challenges on the front end last March. And we said, you know what, we're just not going to assess that way again. Screenings and stuff, we're still doing one-on-one. And it's time consuming, but we tend to do those on the one asynchronous day we have, which is Wednesday. I hope that helps. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's really tough, and that's reality. I also want to just excuse Alejandra Corona Ortega went back to class. Her students were excited to see her. From our perspective, we recognize that fidelity is there is some data and some information that we can collect right now, and there is some that is going to be more challenging. We have had hard conversations with some of our ELL families around encouraging them to engage in in-person learning when some of their deep concerns like really lead them towards wanting to continue with distance learning, because we believe that in-person learning is better in meaningful ways for ELs. We have maintained the interventions that we normally do with our students. We have maintained doing the same glorious NWEA map testing that we do several times a year as required by the state. And we recognize that fidelity is going to be a meaningful challenge that we have to keep working through, and we're excited for a time when all of our students are here, when we're making sure that we're getting all the information that we need.
Yeah, I agree. It's a challenge. We have invited some of our students into the building to a separate room that's not in the classroom with other students, but there are some families who do not want to bring their students in. So we just do our best. We ask them, explain to them that this is an important assessment and that, they are not allowed to help their student, but we get what we get. And I think most of us, if we had the student last year, are aware of their levels and know if they've had help or not.
And I would suggest that the way to start, the place to begin, is by really closely analyzing the linguistic profile of the student, because that is going to really give you, it might not give you how much knowledge do they have in math or this standard or the other standard, but what it's going to tell you is what is it that they are able to, which are the domains that you are going to, use, to support the others. And what are the scaffolds that you need to put in place so that they can have access to the content. I love the fact that it was said, it's about working and knowing each individual student, and oftentimes the assessments might not be valid or reliable because language interferes, so to the extent that you are able to also use their primary language to assess what it is that they know and they don't know, so that then you can just support them with the language. Depending on when the students did arrive to this country or the past educational experiences, just looking at the history, then you'll be able to again address those needs.
Thanks all for weighing in on that. And in the interest of time, I think we will close on that note. Thanks to the the participant for sharing that question. It looks like we may have received one additional, that was just a positive communication. So just a good job. Thank you to the panelists. So thank you for that. At this point, we are going to close. We thank you for being in attendance. We're so thrilled that you were here today to talk with us or to go through this topic. We feel that it's very important, and again, we feel it's an opportunity it's a jumping off point. Let us know how we can be supportive to your needs. We have included our contact, Michael and my contact information, but our L team is a large one. We have a lot of folks at the State Department of Education that do a lot of different work in different areas, but care deeply about English learners. Our colleague Janet Stuck, we work with very regularly, and many of you know her well. She's in our performance office and works in the student assessment area. Christy Alberino also supports work on ELS, along with Wendy Harwin in our talent office, and many folks in our academic office, our talent office, our performance office, turnaround office, etc. So we are really working to meet your needs. I thank our colleagues that were here today, Felicia, Shakira, Rob, and Lisa, and very much especially to all of our panelists and to all of our attendees. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. We look forward to continuing our collaboration with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.